welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to be filming again. It has been a hot minute, and as I hope you can notice, I am in my new house. If you follow me on Instagram, which is mostly just selfies and pictures of my dog, but I also have up a house tour of my new place, and it's so awesome. And this is my official YouTube room. I have a new camera, new microphone, so I think we're gonna have a fun time. So this video I have been thinking about for months and months and months now, and it's so ridiculous. I'm currently reading 3 books. I'm going super hard on my writing. I have videos related to that coming up, but for this, I wanted to get into my published fan fiction work. And by published, I mean I threw it up on the internet when I was 19. When I lived in LA, which I moved out there from Iowa when I was 18 and lived there for 8 months before moving back. I moved out with my friend. We lived in a studio apartment, so we didn't even have bedrooms, on air mattresses. I didn't have a car. It was a wild, wild time back in little 2013, 2014. 19-year-old Claire had no idea what she was doing. And she also had terrible habits, like eating an entire tub of ice cream every day and sleeping until 4 p.m. and then staying up all night. During that time, I wrote some fan fiction for Avatar: The Last Airbender, the love of my life, the only fan fiction genre I do read. I was afraid that I wouldn't even have the password to my account, but I do. And we're gonna read it together. Okay, if you like this kind of video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss any videos like this in the future. This professional looking studio. Ooh, I'm just so excited. I am wearing a shirt, by the way. Jeez Louise. And look, I can actually use my phone in videos because it's not the one filming me. It's wild. I don't even know where to begin. So in case you guys don't know, Avatar: The Last Airbender is my favorite just thing that exists. It's my favorite fictional story. I've seen it roughly 17 or 18 times. I don't know, I've lost track. And Zuko and Katara are my favorite fictional couple ever. And anytime that I like another fictional couple, it's usually because they remind me of Zuko and Katara. I exclusively read Avatar fan fiction, although not as often as I used to, and I exclusively read Zutara fan fiction. So, as you can imagine, I wrote Zutara fan fiction. Okay, I'll just get to it. I was so excited to film this video for weeks, and now we're doing it. I'm like, wait, I don't want to do this anymore. Yes, I do. It's going to be so fun. It's called, I'm not telling any of you what it's called. You don't need to find this. First, I give a little hello everyone, this is my first chapter with more to follow, which is a lie. I only do one more chapter. It's going to be a slow burn. I want characters and relationships to build naturally so you can get to the good stuff. I wanted to eventually write smut. That's what started this whole thing. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so, wrapped in yellow, pretend it's gold. I kind of like that chapter heading. 76. The number sneaked itself into Katara's daydreams, and once it presented itself, she was fixated. What? It sneaked itself, presented itself, and she was fixated. 76 days since the end of the 100-Year War. She didn't necessarily like that she was keeping count, but there has yet to be a day when the mental tick hadn't popped into her head. Trying to force her mind into wandering, she fluttered her eyes over to the array of flowers that engulfed her. The garden was like a living fire pit, hundreds of flowers shimmering in an ombre of blood reds, to ripe oranges, to orchids that could have been mended out of gold. Katara wondered if she ever appreciated the garden before. Sorry about that, I have a contractor who came who needed to repair some stairs. You know, house stuff. Where was I? Blah, blah, blah. The waterbender leaned against a tree, exhausted. I'm slipping, she sighed heavily to herself. Thinking back through the previous 76 days, she tried to piece together all the details from every meeting in every nation. She held her head in her hands as her mind grew heavy, overwhelmed by the different narratives. Some villages seek punishment, some need money, and some hardly have a town to speak of. So many requests, demands, needs, all running together in an indistinguishable slur. Overwhelmed, she closed her eyes, and behind the black drapes of her eyelids, she imagined snow blocks and people dressed in fur. Aw, other than the black drapes of her eyelids, that was a good paragraph. At least Gran has Sokka now, Katara reminded herself. She only spent 3 days with her grandmother before being whisked away to another crisis. She thought back to the brief time before... Oh my gosh, what am I saying? She thought back to the brief time before the war ended, when everyone was in one place, living together. She realized now how naive it was for her to believe that it would stay that way. Katara glanced at the palace in front of her, the golden red paint dancing in the sun. Her whole life she feared and hated this very palace, but now it's the closest thing she has to a permanent resident. She and Aang even have their own suite, since their visits have become so frequent. Katara sighed deeply, remembering the room they have yet to share together. He left so quickly, hardly giving her a chance to say goodbye. So as you can see, I'm trying to set up a rift between her and Aang, because like eventually I need her and the Zuko thing to work out. But as if Aang wouldn't even want to leave without her, Aang would not just quickly say goodbye. I mean, I'm 1,000% for Zuko and Katara, but like I love Aang so much, and I am being so disrespectful to him right now. The chords of a soft, deep whistle suddenly came around the distant bend, and Katara stood up straighter and smiled with pure delight. As her lips grew, a small but steady stream of guilt pressed on her mind. But the whistling man got closer. Her negative warnings were flooded over by her present excitement. Oh, could my eyes be deceiving me? No, this cannot be. This honor is too great. Katara sarcastically flung her arms out over her head as she spun around to face her friend. Zuko gave a half smirk as he sauntered towards her. His lack of amusement had her crack up, and the Fire Lord's smile grew genuine. Was that entrance really necessary? Okay, she didn't enter, he entered, Zuko. Zuko tried to mumble to upkeep his Fire Lord facade. It's not a facade, you are actually the Fire Lord. But his soft chuckle betrayed him. Once again, he could feel the aches of responsibility and authority melt away, and what was left was just Zuko. She always brings me back. I say it's gonna be a slow burn. It's not a slow burn. Now relaxed, Zuko caught up to her before they continued walking through the palace's flower garden. Was it necessary to schedule 5 ambassador meetings in one day? Katara crossed her tanned arms. I highly doubt it. I think you can put up with a little bit of my dramatizations. Katara glared over at the firebender, but grew distracted by the tall bush dusted in plain yellow flowers behind him. The most beautiful ones, the ones that glittered and danced amongst the stale leaves, were the closest to his eyes. Oh God, as if his golden slivers whispered the secrets of how to be so damningly piercing. Okay, hold on, I'm gonna read that again. So the flowers are plain, but there are beautiful ones amongst the plain ones. The flowers are plain and the leaves are stale, but there are some that are extra beautiful and glitter in the sunlight. Dance and glitter in the sunlight. And they were the closest ones to his eyes. I think because he's in front of the bushes, so they would be like right here. As if his golden slivers, because he has small eyes, whispered the secrets, oh I spelled secrets so wrong, of how to be so damningly piercing. ... They're pretty, I guess. His voice cut through her thoughts and she shook her head to regain focus. Assuming that's what you were staring at. Zuko held his chin and smiled, purposely appearing egotistical. Okay, I didn't even notice at first, but I'm head hopping like crazy. Because you start off in Katara's, but you definitely switch over to Zuko's point of view. And this is no way like an omnipresent voice. This is me not knowing what I'm doing. Could you be any more vain? Katara nudged the firebender out of his pose and giggled as the mighty Fire Lord struggled to regain his balance. Well, as I was saying before you so rudely decided to space off, he paused to hear the chime of Katara's laugh. I was explaining that I got up 2 hours before you and will most likely go to sleep 2 hours later than you. The stone bench ahead appeared ever more enticing, and the waterbender quickly followed his lead and sat down. Whose head were we in that sentence? I have no clue. And this kind of work requires long days and sleepless nights. This is a permanent schedule. My permanent schedule. I'll never get any real time away from it all. Not that I'm complaining, Zuko rushed, realizing that he probably came off as whiny, and quickly covered his tracks. This is my destiny. This is who I am. I need this. It's just... He paused to glance at the waterbender, draped in orange and yellow and her blue eyes staring kindly at him. Seeing him. Too much of him. At least you'll be relieved of your duties soon. His voice snapped as he looked down at his feet. So part of the reason that I like Zuko and Katara so much is because they do have that angsty Beauty and the Beast vibe relationship going on where like they can't quite see eye to eye and they fight a lot. I already established they're clearly really good friends, but I want that tension again and I don't know how to create it, so I'm just having Zuko get mad for no reason. You didn't have to take the job. You could quit any time. Katara quickly regretted, not speaking in thicker sarcasm, but her brother's gift for banter hasn't quite rubbed off on her. So is that supposed to be a joke? That doesn't even make sense as a joke, but okay. Now you and I both know why that's not true. Zuko scoffed as he stared at his shoes, twisting his thumb as his face grew red. You honestly think this was something I could turn down? It's not like this position has a lot of candidates, and you know that. His damn temper seeped out again, and when he faced Katara, her small smile was strained against her cheeks. Her eyes began to subtly fill, and she glanced away, pretending to admire the trees across the path. Was she crying? What was there to cry about? So silly. Zuko was brought back to a ghostly memory of the similar strong, silent pain his own mother would display when she had to pretend to be content around him. And with the parallels so clearly set in his mind's eye, the waterbender resembled a beauty he thought has long abandoned him. With a cautious approach, he set his hand on her shoulder. Katara shuddered, slightly startled by his touch. I know it's been a hard transition for you. Zuko tried to comfort her, and for a moment, she was. Again, whose point of view are we in? Doesn't matter. But I hope you feel better knowing it's only temporary. Katara kept eye contact with him, although her smile faded. Honestly, sometimes I wish I could take your place. Why? Katara abruptly stood, letting Zuko's hand fall to the stone seat. You honestly believe that being an ambassador for abolished air nomads is such an easy task? Ooh, so she's not even a waterbender ambassador. She's an air nomad ambassador. That's kind of cool. Katara's eyebrows forged together in piercing rage. Piercing rage? Why are you mad? Well, probably for you, oh great and powerful Fire Lord Zook. I have it cut off at Zook. She doesn't even get to say Zuko, just Zook. I'm not saying it's easy, the firebender mumbled, looking down at his feet, his fingers pinching the bridge of his nose. I'm simply saying, his voice grew louder in octaves of anger. In octaves of anger? That compared to being the ruler of a nation everyone hates and distrusts for the rest of my life, a month as his ambassador doesn't sound that bad. Katara slapped... Oh my god. Katara slapped him with enough force to leave his cheek as red as the scar above it. Wait, what? Why? Okay, Katara is so irrationally, emotional and angry during this. What the frick-frack, Katara? For a moment, only Katara's heavy, angry breathing encapsulated him. I don't want to read this anymore. It's getting ridiculous. For a moment, only Katara's heavy, angry breathing encapsulated him, blurring his senses. He stared into her fierce eyes, unapologetic for her actions. It was moments like these, when she was livid with righteous anger, that all resemblance of a young girl vanished, and what was left was beautiful, despite being annoyingly virtuous. The sting of her slap began to soften, and he could convince himself, oh my god, what? Okay. The sting of her slap began to soften, and he could convince himself that it was the remaining prickles of her lips or her bite. What? So did you like that, Zuko? Is that what I was trying to get at? That, The slapping didn't bother him.
The silence broke when her voice strained. At least you know the best interests of your own people. At least you know their culture, their history. Zuko stood silently. Droplets formed in her eyes as her body trembled. I am not an airbender. I have no right to be making such... ... important decisions. I don't know what I'm doing.
Girl, me neither. I don't know what I was writing.
It's a rare sight, Zuko thought carefully, to be a witness when she was so frightened. Then you shouldn't have to. Zuko's bluntness pushed Katara's eyebrows together, and her body regained stillness. There was a lot of eyebrow action going on here. I feel like when I didn't know what to write after the dialogue tag, I just mentioned something about their eyebrows and called it a day. Of course I have to. Aang asked me, no, pleaded with me, ... Well, maybe Aang's wrong.
Zuko, whoa. First of all, Aang's never wrong. Okay, pause. The problem with Zutara FanFiction, and I have read plenty, but it's one of those things where it really only 100% works if you go all the way back to the beginning. If you basically rewrite the story with that endgame in mind. When you try to make it after the fact, it never quite feels right because Aang always has to do something so crazy and so out of character to make his and Katara's relationship not work, because Aang is such a precious, beautiful, perfect baby. And I don't even hate Katara and Aang, so it's like once they get together by the end of the series, it's like, okay, is it my favorite? No. Do I get it? Yes. I'm scolding my former self right now. Oh god.
Well, maybe Aang's wrong. Zuko and Katara stood in silence, both suddenly warm, their locked jaws.
I definitely meant their jaws locked.
The waterbender realized she was in a fighting stance and crossed her arms back in front of her, but turned slightly away from Zuko. Aang's not wrong. Her tone was scolding, like the death threat she used to give, but now he's not begging her for approval or looking for a fight. You believe that because he's the Avatar. Katara quickly spinned around to face him. Don't you dare play that card, Zuko. Or maybe it's just because he's your boyfriend. I don't. So you don't think I can make decisions for myself?
Katara sounds like such a brat.
Katara stepped forward. Her fingertips could feel the water pulsating through the foliage. No, Zuko's eyes bulged as he threw his hands forward. That's the thing, I know you can. Aang's my greatest ally, not to mention my closest friend. I know the kind of ... influence he can have on someone. Ha! Katara shrieked as her arms flew above her. He's our sky bison, Zuko.
What? Let me read that again. He's our sky bison, Zuko. What a random revelation. Okay, hold on. Let me try to piece this together.
He's our sky bison, Zuko. Do you realize what this means? Katara knew she was beginning to sound hysterical. But she continued, creeping closer to the firebender. If the rumor is true and there really are sky bison, who's to say there aren't more airbenders? And you would drop everything too if you found out there was a colony of dragons. Okay, so at the beginning, when it talked about Aang rushing off to do something and leaving Katara so fast, it's because there's a rumor that they found a herd of sky bison, and so he's going to investigate that.
Boy, did that come out of nowhere.
Unless I had other more important world-building projects to do, Zuko inched forward, and the two were only a handshake apart. If I had someone who was smart and capable, and who I trusted enough to let them be the ambassador of my own nation, I think I could let them go off on their own and confirm if there were in fact any sky bison.
Is he suggesting that Aang messed up by not making Katara be the one to check out the sky bison thing? Because I don't see why Katara would be better suited than Aang in this situation.
Katara's eyes suddenly welled with tears again. With her palm, she shoved the firebender away from her. What are you trying to say, Zuko?
Katara heaved staggered breaths as water automatically started forming around her hands. I just don't know why they're getting so angry, and now they're ready to duel.
Aang made the wrong call.
This is all in caps.
Zuko strode up to her face with furious eyes, her hands lifted higher towards him, ready to duel. Fire coursed through his veins. Fighting her was engraved into his muscles. He's become so familiar with this scene. but the warm energy pulsating through him began to... Oh my god, I'm not reading this. Inappropriate. His fighting strategy was bombarded with the phantom sensation of her fingers gripping his hair. What? Zuko sighed heavily, softening his stance, trying to clear his head. He wasn't going to let this stupid fantasy distract him from the issue at hand, but the warmth... Not reading that. So, Katara is legitimately upset with him, to the point they're about to brawl with each other, and then he randomly decided to start fantasizing about her. Zuko. I've heard you've been struggling to make the right decision, or just any decisions, during the ambassador meetings. You're trying to rebuild a world, and you're not even sure what it's supposed to look like. I get it, Katara. Her face was still hardened in anger, as well as her raised fist gloved in water. Zuko grabbed her hands and the liquid splashed onto their feet. Slowly, he brought her hands closer to his jaw. So I don't know why the one guy who knows everything about this, who could really be needed, has left you here to make all the decisions. Her fingers were now curled under his chin. She stared at him coldly, but the smooth spot under his jaw was distracting. I don't think it's right, Katara. I don't want... Okay, so it starts to get really ridiculous, and basically she's holding his jaw, and then he, like, I can't even read this. They do something really weird, and I don't know why they're doing it. Okay, so he basically starts sucking on her finger. And I don't know, like, if I thought that was just so, like, sexy and edgy, but low-key, because they're not even kissing yet. It's also like, why would he start doing that? What is compelling this guy to do something so crazy? Who wrote this? And it goes on for, like, a paragraph in excruciating detail. Oh my god. So, beyond all that, the breathless gasp he drew out of her fostered the forgotten memory of his giggling tattooed friend waving goodbye only a week before. Despite his better, or rather idiotic judgment, Zuko dragged her tanned skin out of his mouth and placed the pad of her finger on his lower lip. The pain and relief in her eyes was suffocating. So he's like holding her finger here and saying, "I'm sorry." He let go of her and turned away from the mute waterbender. They stood in silence that lacked the previous energy. "I'm sorry. I wish I could save you from the hardship." A metal whip slashed his arm and Zuko plummeted to the ground. Katara in a large stream of floating water towered above him. "I don't need you to save me. In fact, I don't want you to." Katara let the water crash down as she began to walk away with heavy strides. "He won't be back for at least a month," Zuko shouted at her as he struggled to pull himself off the ground. "It's not going to get any easier." Katara stopped walking, but refused to turn around. "I know I'm not him, but my door is always open, if you need help," he mumbled to himself as he began to rise from the ground. "Help with the meetings, of course." Katara listened as the disgruntled firebender walked away and waited until the sound of his footsteps vanished. She stood against the hollow breeze, trying to undo a connection Zuko wired for her. She once again passed the tall bush with the plain yellow flowers. They truly couldn't shine on their own. Katara's hands flung up in front of her and her fingertips bent the moisture out of the yellow petals. The flowers hung, cracked and dried, and Katara swung her heel with brute force on the bush. The plant now stood bare and limp, and Katara stared at the withered petals on the soil. She shook her head and continued on her path to the palace, and that is the end of chapter 1. So what did we learn, boys and girls? Part of the reason I was stumbling so badly, other than the fact that I haven't read this out loud before, is that I was a terrible speller. Lots of head hopping. I didn't know who was speaking or whose head I was in. And the grammar was also a little rough. There's definitely some ideas that I think are pretty cool. I think the whole Katara being an air nomad ambassador is really interesting. Aang going off on his own to search for some bison, leaving Katara behind, and that causing a bit of a rift between them because she doesn't know what to do. But I don't really think that would cause a rift. Everybody would be pretty understanding that you're just an ambassador for the air nomads. Aang is away on this like important mission. And so whatever major decisions that need to be made, if we have to wait for Aang to come back, we can. It's not that big of an issue as I think I wanted it to be, but I could see how it could cause issues maybe if other elements were set up better. I like the idea of the Fire Nation Palace becoming the closest thing they have to a home because they're traveling so much. And then there's like little motifs that I was trying to pull off that I obviously did not do successfully. I liked that I was trying to compare these like golden flowers to Zuko's eyes, even though I did it in the most ridiculous way possible. But then I liked how it came around at the end and she like sucked the water out of the flowers and kicked them off with her heel. Way too much description, way too much focus on the eyebrows. And then obviously that weird trying to be sexy thing in the middle of the story that neither one brings up later too. Like she's walking away and she's stressed out about Aang, not about like Zuko doing this like really intimate weird thing with her in the middle of their fight. Which is another thing. I really love romantic relationships. Like I said, Beauty and the Beast or Pride and Prejudice, where they kind of start off like they're mad at each other or they just can't see eye to eye. So I was trying to do that, but I clearly didn't know how because it was a wreck. Anyway, so that was fun, right guys? Like I said, I have a part 2 because there is a second chapter. So if you wanna hear the audio version of my crazy Avatar Zutara fanfiction from like 2013. Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can see more videos like this in the future. Thank you guys so much. I hope this was fun. I hope you like my new setup. Please let me know down in the comments below. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.